Now welcome to another Let's Watch Some Star Wars, another deep dive into the Acolyte, where this time we'll be taking a closer look at the 6th episode called Teach/Corrupt. And as usual, I'm just going to fire up the episode, start watching it again for the second time, and pause it every so often and put up a screenshot and discuss what is going on and tell you what I maybe like or don't like about it, or to give some theories about whatever it might be. And so, wasting no time, let's get right into the episode. Alright, so the episode begins with Osha waking up in Qimir's little hideout in the Strangers, or Darth Smiley's, or Smilo Ren's little secret Sith lair. And she has been all bandaged up. There is food waiting for her. It is basically the classic example of how a bad guy is going to show I'm not so bad after all. That he is going to try and convince her, maybe I have a good point here, and that maybe, again, you should join me. Which, again, as I said in yesterday's late night review, it was done pretty well. This will be handled pretty well between these two. It has some problems here and there. But overall, I like this approach. I like the idea of a Sith having to, show the better side of being a Sith in order to turn somebody. And that is if Qimir is even a Sith in the first place, but we'll not worry about the semantics of it, I guess. We will not worry about what he technically is or isn't right now. All we know is he is a dark side user, and he is looking for an apprentice, and we will learn he has been kind of kicked out by a master, and I think we can assume it is a master Sith and not a master Jedi. Though maybe it will be one and the same. We can discuss that theory later. Anyway, Osha finds a little knife, very similar to the ones that May used to use, and she goes looking for her gracious host, or perhaps just a way off whatever planet she happens to be on. She has, of course, woken up in a cave, and when she goes outside, she sees she's basically on a water world, one that looks a whole heck of a lot like Ahch-To from The Last Jedi. That looks like the place where the first Jedi Temple is. And I am going to assume, because they called this an unknown planet, that this is indeed Ahch-To. Though I don't know why you don't just name it. And there are other possibilities. There is a cortosis on the planet, and in Legends, in the Plagueis novel, there was a planet very similar to this, or another water planet. We don't know what it technically looked like. We had it described to us. But that planet was called Baldemnik, and this could be that, though I don't know why you don't just say that's the planet. I feel like the only reason you try to keep it mysterious is because it is Ahch-To. And I do feel like that is an interesting choice to use Ahch-To, and I can't help but think maybe it is partly a nod to The Last Jedi here, because she is a fan of that film, she is a fan of Rian Johnson, and there are other nods to the film in this episode. And we know she even talked to him about this series, so perhaps she is just using it because of that. Though I feel like there are potentially bigger lore implications here, especially considering we do have a movie in the works, or planned at least, we'll see if we actually get it. But we do have a Dawn of the Jedi movie about the first Jedi, and this is where the first Jedi Temple is, so is there a bigger plan in motion here? Whatever the case may be with that, the scene ends with Osha spotting Qimir heading off to his bathing spot, and she follows him. Obviously, he wants her to follow him. I think he is very well aware that she is there. Anyway, we then see the Jedi shuttle leaving Kofar, the one that will have, of course, May and Sol on it. Or May pretending to be Osha on it, and Sol apparently falling for it. Anyway, we see the ship leave the planet, head off into orbit around it, and Sol immediately tries to contact the Jedi to tell them what has happened, that his whole team has been slaughtered. There's some interference, but what I think is a Padawan of Vernestra's gets the message, and I'm assuming somehow, some way, this information will go up with a chain to the Jedi Council itself. I don't know how you keep under wraps the death of a half dozen Jedi. And even if you do try to keep it under wraps, assuming Yoda did not sense the carnage that happened on Kofar, like we have seen him sense tragedies and pain out of Jedi before. But assuming Yoda didn't sense it for whatever reason, because, well, it doesn't seem like anybody senses anything in this show. But assuming Yoda didn't sense it, they're still going to wonder what happened to, whatever happened to Master Indara. Where did she go? Why haven't we seen her in, forever? I don't think there is any way to keep what happened from the Council. They are going to be aware that some sort of dark side user has slaughtered a bunch of Jedi, and that Master Sol tried to contact them, tried to tell them what had happened, and where does it go from there? That is the big question, I guess, of the show right now. How do we rectify this problem? How do we have it where in 100 years' time, Ki-Adi-Mundi, who is alive during this time, apparently, how do we get to the point where he says the Sith have been extinct for a millennium, And nobody on the Jedi Council goes, well, there was that incident 100 years ago. But setting that question aside for now, another question I had kind of going into the episode and continue to have after the episode is, why did May pretend to be Osha? What was she trying to gain from doing that? And I've seen some people say, well, she wanted to kill Sol, but she could have just done that. She literally was there when he woke up. She could have killed him before he woke up. If her plan was to kill Sol, why not just do it then? And so she must want something else. She must have something else in mind, right? What is that something exactly? It did at one point seem like she was trying to answer a call from the Jedi, and we have no idea what she was going to say to them. I kind of get the impression she was going to try to pin it on Sol, that she was going to say Master Sol has gone crazy and killed a bunch of Jedi or something like that. Though I don't know why they would ever believe her. I don't know why we have this kind of let's pin it on Sol thing going on right now, which Vernestra kind of implies a little later in the episode too. I mean, certainly they would be able to look into his mind, and they would be able to sense his feelings, and though, yes, there is guilt there are problems there, he has clearly done something wrong in the past. I don't know that they would come to believe that he had murdered a bunch of Jedi. Though you may want to make the argument that years later in the Clone Wars, Ahsoka is accused of something, and the Jedi believe that, so who knows. The other big question then going into the episode related to the May question is, does Sol actually know that it isn't Osha, or does he not? Is he sensing that it isn't her, or is he completely kind of overwhelmed by all this grief? He did just lose a bunch of fellow Jedi and friends. I could understand if he is not exactly clear on all of his feelings right now. But at the same time, I would argue sensing something is kind of just a natural ability. It just kind of happens whether Jedi are clouded emotionally or not. You're just kind of always sensing the world around you, just like you're always seeing and hearing and tasting. It is like an extra sense. We even see at one point that May has a knife and is, I guess, going to kill Sol. I don't know why she didn't do that before. This is why I have a problem with the show. There is potential here. There is a story here that I'm like, this could have worked. This could have been interesting. But then they do stupid shit like this. Why are you going to kill him now when you could have just killed him before? Did you need him to take the ship or something? Was he the only one who could activate it? Is that what the problem was? And if that is, then you kind of need to make that clear. Because right now I'm wondering, why is she going to kill the guy she could have killed 10 minutes ago? But anyway, I kind of always figured that the Force and seeing things before they happen is like a spidey sense, right? It just happens. You don't have to actively be trying to see things before they happen. When someone is going to sneak up on you with a knife, you're just going to know it's happening whether you're trying to sense it or not. But he seems oblivious to it here, though again, maybe he knows it's actually May and he's trying to get something, though I don't know what he would be trying to get. He is under the impression, or so you would think, that the Sith Master is dead, that Qimir is dead. You would really think that is why he let the bugs take him away, because he kind of wanted to circumvent having to be the one who killed him, that he instead let him die, which is really not all that different when you think about it. But I guess he kind of justifies it in his head as being different. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that really bugs me about the show. It could be decent, it could be okay, it could be good even, but then they do things like this and you're just left scratching your head as to what motivates these characters, why they flip-flop and change their mind, and then you realize it's just to get the plot moving. And so then kind of adding to or compounding the confusion here, as we see May trying to sneak up on Sol with a knife to, I guess, again, kill him, Sol seems to sense someone is behind him. Either that or he hears her, even though she's being all sneaky, stealth assassin-like. But before turning around, he simply says, Osha, take the ship, I have to go reset the transceiver. So did he just sense a generic feeling in the Force? Did he not sense anything wrong with it? And again, I get he is very traumatized right now. He is very grief-stricken. I think Lee Jung-jae, the actor here, does a great job portraying it as well. We even see him going down to reset the transceiver, and he kind of has a moment where he breaks down, essentially, where it all kind of catches up to him. And I like this. I am fine with this. I am fine with the Jedi having to deal with their emotions, which is what they do. They don't try to suppress their emotions or pretend they don't have them. They learn how to cope with them. And of course, Sol is going through something right now. He's lost a lot of people. He's lost friends. It is going to be difficult for a human being, a person with emotions, to grapple with these emotions. And his Jedi training should help him deal with it. But how do you deal with the loss of 7 friends? And so, no, I don't have an issue with this. A lot of people seem to think I want to see the perfect example of the Jedi at all times, when what I want to see is human beings being Jedi and having their flaws, yes, but I don't want to see the flaws or what they have done or failed to do or whatever it might be lead to the creation of the Sith and in some way justify their existence. That we're going to see that Sol did something so screwed up, he is partly responsible for Qimir or for something along those lines. I don't want to see the Sith justified by the story. Now, that doesn't mean the Sith can't feel like they're justified in existing, or that they don't feel like they have been wronged, or whatever it might be. I just don't want to see the Jedi blamed for the existence of the Sith. And I also don't want it implied that balance is somehow in between the two, that because the Jedi are so extreme and so good, that they lead to the creation of the Sith, and then they fight the Jedi, and that is what causes the problem. I don't want it to be where the existence of the Jedi is what is creating the Sith. I think that is destroying the whole point of Star Wars. I don't need the Jedi to be perfect all the time, as I don't need the Sith to be generic evil bad guys who do bad things for bad reasons. They can be complex characters. They can fully believe in what they are doing, but the show needs to make it clear that the Sith are the bad guys and the Jedi are the good guys. Instead, it feels like they try to sell us that the truth is somewhere in between. But moving on from that, we then go back to Ahch-To, or what I assume is Ahch-To, and it is now bath time for Darth Cheeks. Qimir is going to basically get naked and go in a pool, and Osha is going to watch him. And yeah, this seems a little risque for Star Wars, but I don't really have as much problem with it as maybe some do. I've seen a lot of people saying it is just for the eye candy, essentially. But I do think this is more about him trying to show his vulnerability to her. There is no more vulnerable state than to be naked in front of someone, especially when that someone has a lightsaber that they can strike you down with in a moment. So yeah, I think this scene is more about him trying to present himself in the most benign way possible to begin to work his way in, to begin to twist her mind. Though it does kind of have the same problem you have with Rey and Kylo in The Last Jedi, fittingly enough, since again, this feels like a little bit of an homage to that. You have the problem of Rey, the previous day, had seen Kylo kill Han Solo in cold blood, right in front of her. Someone who is becoming a father figure to her is murdered by this guy. And that is not so easy to forgive and forget. And we have the same kind of issue here. We have Osha, who just watched Qimir kill Yord, who I think was kind of a friend of hers, as well as Jeki, who was becoming a friend, not to mention all the other Jedi. But you have this problem of she just saw him kill all these people, but now that she saw him naked and hot, I'm gonna try to get over that. And though, like I was saying, I do like what they do with Osha and Qimir in this episode. I like how he tries to kind of turn her or twist her to the dark side by making her question the Jedi or question herself. I think that is all well and good. The problem is it needs to be drawn out just a little bit more so we can understand why she so quickly kind of forgets about the things that would be stuck in her head. There is no way she is going to get the image of Yord getting his neck snapped out of her head that quickly. But anyway, yes, Qimir is trying to present a softer side of himself to help her forget all the bad things he has done. And they even talk about how there's a special relationship between a master and a pupil. And this is where we begin to see that he really wants an apprentice. That is what he is after. And though, yes, a Sith can certainly want companionship, again assuming he is a Sith or very similar to one, it does feel a bit too much like he wants just to have a friend, just to have somebody in his life, rather than him being really corrupted by the dark side at this point, and seeing a Sith or an Acolyte or an apprentice as something he could use as a tool. It does seem like they're going the route that he is kind of interested in sharing power, which, if you read the Plagueis novel, that doesn't go so well for those who believe that the Sith can get along and share power. Though, of course, he hasn't read that book. Plagueis hasn't even come around yet in this point in time. So, yeah, maybe he's trying a different approach, and it will ultimately fail for him. Next, we then get this rather curious scene where Sol just kind of enters the cockpit and hugs May, who he thinks is Osha, or maybe thinks is Osha, and tells her thank you for saving him. He then tells her, I'm going to tell the Jedi Council, the High Council, everything. The power on the ship goes out, and I'm assuming that is May's handiwork, and he tells her, hey, why don't you go take a look, see if you can fix that. And I think you could try to make the argument here that yes, Sol knows this is May, and his goal is to try to confess to her, to try to let her know the truth, so that he can try to turn her away from the dark side. He did earlier in the season, in one of the first couple episodes, talk about how if she is alive, he wants to save her. that the goal is not to just go and arrest her or kill her, it is to save her. And if he is that guilty about whatever happened that night 16 years ago, which he very much seems to be, and I think my problem is every week or every episode he feels more and more guilty, which could be because he came to terms with it, and now that's unraveling because May is alive and he has to face it, or I don't know. It just feels like at first it wasn't that bad. It was something he was going to tell Osha and she would understand and it would be all good. But now it's like, oh God, I got to tell the High Council that I screwed everything up and everything is my fault kind of thing. But anyway, you could argue at this point that he knows that it is May and he is attempting to save her, that is why he let her on board and all of that. But that comes with the problem of, what about Osha? You just left Osha behind on a mysterious, dangerous planet that has creatures on it that could kill her at any point, really. And as far as you know, she has no weapon other than the stun gun. Not to mention, you seem to be under the impression, we'll learn this later on, that the bug creatures didn't kill the Sith, so you also left her behind on the planet with the Sith. So the problem here for me is that either Sol never senses until at some point in this episode that this is actually May, he is completely oblivious to it, so grief-stricken he can't see it for some reason, or he has this really idiotic plan to turn May to the light side to save her, essentially, by sacrificing Osha. It feels like either way it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're then taken to Coruscant, where we see Vernestra Rowe. She is having a talk with a senator, I think it is, about some kind of inspection or something. It is all very vague. We hear Senator Rayencourt mentioned that he is gaining support and spreading fear about the Jedi or something. Again, it is very vague, and I think it is meant to try to explain to us why she has this point of view and perhaps why other Jedi have this point of view, or that their image is being tarnished and why they have to worry about their image because they don't want to have the Senate turn against them or something. Again, I don't know. I think this could be interesting, but it is so vague. It's so 10 seconds of dialogue here in the 6th episode of the season that it feels too late to dig into this. It feels like this all should have been covered before and a lot more thoroughly. I mean, your episodes are 30-some minutes long. I feel like you could make your episodes a few minutes longer and have worked this in and made this an important kind of plot point that then explains some of the other action, some of the fears of the Jedi at the time. Not that I want to use the word fear and Jedi together, but you get my point, that there is something going on, that the Senate is looking closely at the Jedi right now, and the Jedi are trying to be on their best behavior, essentially, and this is the way wrong time for a Jedi to fall to the dark side and to start wreaking havoc in the galaxy and killing people. Either way, the scene then ends with what I'm assuming is Vernestra's Padawan, because I think Sol was trying to contact Vernestra and got her Padawan. But anyway, I think it is Vernestra's Padawan. He comes in, interrupts the meeting, and says, Sol contacted and said pretty much everybody is dead. So Vernestra is like, well, we gotta go send a rescue team, and off they go. We're then back on probably Octo 2 with Osha and Qimir, and Osha is like, you sound or talk an awful lot like a Jedi. And Qimir is like, well, funny enough, I used to be a Jedi. And she's like, well, I never heard of you. And he's like, well, it was a very long time ago. And the question here is he lying or is he telling the truth? Was he actually a Jedi? Or maybe he was trained by a fallen Jedi or something along that lines. And so it is true from a certain point of view. Now, my theory is that the Sith Master is going to end up to be Vernestra Rowe. But I think there is a chance he was once her Padawan back in the day, and she has covered that up too, probably. And she was kind of trying to not only train him to be a Jedi, but to train him to be a little something more or a little something different than a Jedi. He eventually disappointed her and kicked him out, and now he is looking for a friend. But whatever his past may or may not be, Osha is like, Sol is just going to come and find me here, and he's very strong in the Force, and he's going to take care of you. And Qimir is like, you're pretty strong in the Force too. Trying to, again, kind of weasel in, try to sweet talk her in a manner of speaking. He then says you better start swimming if you want to make it to the ship before nightfall and get out of here. Again, trying to be as, shall we say, disarming as possible, as harmless as possible, to try to make himself look as innocent as possible. And instead of going towards the ship to escape, she decides to, of course, follow Qimir. And again, I'm fine with all this. I like it. I think it is a good Sith tactic. I think it is very similar to, as I mentioned in my review last night, it's very similar to how Palpatine starts to turn Anakin. The difference there, of course, is we had years of time, or Palpatine had years of time to pull it off, and Qimir has to do it in like a day, which is why I think this all should have happened sooner. You could have done more with them. You could have spread this out more, made it a little more believable, rather than by the end of the day, she's like, this guy who murdered my friends, who murdered the other Jedi, and probably wants to kill my master, he makes some really good points. We then have this little, I guess you could call it a cute little scene, a little levity, which is fine. Star Wars can have its kind of goofier moments. I am okay with that. But we have a little scene where Basil basically attacks May because he knows it's May. He's got a pretty good sniffer. And we then see May erase Pip's memory, and she then asks Pip to try to figure out why the power has gone out, which then means it wasn't her who tampered with something and caused the power to go out. Not that I know why she would have necessarily done that anyway. So was it actually Basil who did it? I don't know. Or did the power just go out at the perfect time for the plot to need it to go out or something? We're then back to probably Act 2, where Osha is asking Qimir, what did you mean by strength in the Force? I don't have any strength in the Force anymore. It has faded away. The Jedi told me that if you don't exercise it, it just goes away as you get older. And he's like, nah, there's another way to access all that power. You gotta just kind of tap into your emotions. You gotta tap into anger, fear, loss, and desire. And she's like, no, that is the dark side. And he's like, that's kind of semantics. She then brings up the fact that you murdered my friends. I really shouldn't be listening to you. And he's like, well, I didn't kill your friends as much as I killed those who threatened my existence. He then goes on to say, why did you really care about them anyway? Why did you love people who couldn't love you back the same way? And then she ends by saying, I'm not my sister. You're not going to corrupt me quite so easily. And this is, for the most part, another fine interaction between the two, another good stepping stone to him trying to basically sway her or convince her that maybe her ways or the Jedi ways are not the right ways. The only issue I really have is that as a Padawan, she would know that the Jedi are based on love, that they do love other people, that they can love you, they just can't possess you. The whole foundation of the Jedi, their very core beliefs are about loving other people unconditionally, and that is why you go and help people, because you care about them. And yeah, he is trying to make the point that maybe she has stronger feelings towards some of them, that they can't reciprocate those stronger feelings, and that is an issue. But that is part of being a Jedi. You do have to give up possessions in order to serve a greater good. And if you're not able to do that, well, then you are free to leave the Jedi Order, to let your powers kind of fade away, and to find a different life or a different place and purpose in the galaxy. The two then take the conversation outside, and Qimir is like, aren't you forgetting something? Aren't you forgetting to do what you came here to do, which is to kill me? And she's all like, well, the Jedi don't kill the unarmed. And he's like, why do you still talk about yourself as one of them? They didn't want you. You're not a Jedi. And she's like, that's not true. I am the one who left. He then tries to argue that you are your emotions, that you are all this fear and loss and anger that you feel, which is why they kicked you out, which is why they didn't want you. They rejected who you were. She kind of disagrees with that, and then he's like, well, why aren't you a Jedi then? And she kind of bursts out, I failed, or because I failed, and pulls out the lightsaber, holds it to his neck. And he is like, I understand you. I understand you lost everything because I lost everything too. And then he says, but when you lose everything, that is when you are finally free. Which is a line that I don't have too much problem with in and of itself, or that he would say that to her in this moment. I don't know that it is the most Sith line ever, when you consider that the Sith are kind of, or are the epitome of selfishness, that how you fall to the dark side is you fear losing something. If we look at the story of Anakin Skywalker, the reason why he falls to the dark side isn't because he loses everything. He falls to the dark side because he is afraid to lose Padme, and he sides with Palpatine. And then he loses her because he went to the dark side and sided with Palpatine. That is the irony of the dark side. That what you want from it is likely not going to be what you get from it. You are indeed going to lose the things you care about, but that doesn't offer you freedom. That offers you the pain and the anger that fuels your further fall into the dark side. But anyway, again, for the most part, another good scene between the two. I just have the same issue of it all feels like it is happening rather fast. It is a very quick kind of turn for her. There's then a very quick scene back on Coruscant where Vernestra is probably more like a secretary than a Padawan, I think, but her secretary is like, oh, you're coming with us to Kofar? And she's like, well, yeah, I gotta see what happened. I need to go take care of this. Which really, again, starts to lead me to believe that she is going to be the Sith Master, and that she has to go there and fix things, if you will. This is then followed up by May and Sol on the ship, and they have another little conversation where Sol is still looking very distraught. He even seems upset that he couldn't sense the villain's true intentions when he first met them on Olega. This eventually turns into May as Osha saying that I lost a lot of myself when I became a Jedi. And soon after, the power comes back on, and May / not Osha goes to the cockpit. She tries to contact the Jedi to tell them something. I'm assuming she's going to try to say something bad about Sol. I'm not entirely sure what she was going to say. Again, I don't know what her plan is here, what she is trying to accomplish at all. Maybe it becomes clear later on, but it certainly isn't clear now. Either way, this is when Sol stuns her because he has finally realized that this is May and not Osha. I don't know if Basil is the one who finally told him, because Basil is right behind him when he does it, or if something she said tipped him off finally, or if he finally sensed it. I'm guessing it was Basil because we do see kind of May chasing Basil around. So I'm going to assume it was just Basil that told him. Sol then gets a communication from the Jedi saying, hey, stay put, leave your transponder on, we are going to be there soon. And he's like, nah, I'm out of here. He heads to hyperspace, and the moment he does is when the other Jedi show up, which is really quick when you think about it. I mean, Sol doesn't send the message to the Jedi telling them what happened till they get off the planet, and then the power goes out, and how long did that take to fix? I mean, did it take hours? And even still, how long did it take the Jedi to kind of gather up together and get on the ship and to head here? I don't know. It's a minor complaint, but it once again is a matter of the hyperspace travel takes as long or as short as the plot requires. But anyway, they arrive, they go down to the planet, learn that an amber moth colony just hatched, and anybody who was around that probably would have been killed, and maybe that explains why a bunch of Jedi are dead. We then see Vernestra and her secretary and a couple other red shirt Jedi heading into the jungle to check it out. Once again then, it is back to probably Act 2, where Osha and Qimir are having dinner, or actually Osha is eating and Qimir is working on his helmet. She then asks him, is that the same pitch you made to my sister? And he's like, well, maybe, but I made a mistake with May. I thought she wanted more than revenge. I thought she wanted what I want. And of course, Osha asks, what do you want? And he says, the power of 2. He then kind of lifts his shirt up a little bit and reveals he has a big scar on his back. We saw that before during the bathing scene. And she, of course, asks, where did you get the scar? He's like, where do you think I got it? And she's like, looks like someone stabbed you in the back. And he's like, yep, someone threw me away. And then she asks if it was his Jedi Master. But he doesn't answer her. He lets her, of course, believe that it was. And I fully believe it wasn't whoever his Jedi Master was that did it. It is whoever his Sith Master is or was that did it to him. But of course, he wants Osha to believe it was the Jedi. He is trying to turn her against the Jedi, which we've seen something like that before. And so instead of answering his question, he brings up his Cortosis helmet, talks about how it is handy against a lightsaber, but it also acts as a sensory deprivation headpiece, so that when you wear it, it is just you and the Force, and of course what you bring with you. He then tells her to try it on. She's like, I don't trust you. He says you shouldn't, but you should trust yourself. And again, another pretty decent scene here. This was actually pretty good. This is the first time I feel like the show has really got and held my attention, where I am curious to see what happens next. It's just a shame it comes in the 6th episode and that the show isn't more of this and less of whatever else it is. I really think they should have gone all in on the Sith training stuff. Show him capture Osha very early in the season or something, and show him kind of slowly but surely whittling away her defenses and weaseling his way in and turning her to the dark side. I think that could be a very interesting show. Instead, even though, yes, this is good, as I keep saying, it feels pretty quick. This is like day 1 and she's already willing to try on his helmet and kind of see what he has to say. She's drinking the Sith Kool-Aid already. But anyway, then it is back to Kofar, and we are in the jungle. We have Vernestra and her secretary and the other Jedi encountering all the dead Jedi. And Vernestra seems to be kind of sensing or hearing an echo of what happened. And while she is doing that, the other Jedi, her secretary, is kind of asking what does she think happened, and kind of like what Qimir is doing with Osha, you could say. She instead asks him what he thinks is happening, and kind of guides him in a certain direction, perhaps. And the hypothesis he comes up with is that the only one that could have done something like this, the only one who could have taken out so many Jedi, would be Master Soul. Now, Vernestra says that's a pretty big accusation to make, but she doesn't exactly try to shut him down or to shut his little theory down. She's letting it percolate there, probably because I think she is the Sith. I think she either has to be the Sith Master or she is the worst Jedi of all time. We even have the moment where the bug has to come out of the tree, and she uses her light whip to kill it. And I think we are supposed to assume, whether this is a red herring or not, but we are supposed to assume that the whip looks a whole hell of a lot like the scars on Qimir's back, or that it is what has created them. However, maybe the strange part, or a counterpoint, is she at one point says to herself that it is something to tip the scales. She seems to not fully know what this is, and if she is a Sith Master, you would really think she would be aware of how these scales are tipping, or that she wouldn't be surprised by Qimir's actions if she is his master, or was his master at some point and kicked him out. I don't know. I'm really confused by this, not because it is presented extremely well, but because it is not presented extremely well. It seems like they are intentionally trying to point you in a lot of different directions. I don't know, we'll have to, I guess, wait and see, but I would be surprised if Vernestra is not somehow related or associated with the Sith. Again, either she is or she is pretty much the worst Jedi I have ever seen. So I really do, I guess, hope she is with the Sith. Moving on then, we see May waking up and she finds out she is being restrained, and we see Soul is kind of waiting for her to wake up. He then tells her, I promise I'm not going to hurt you. I promise I'm going to let you go. But first we need to do some things. We need to find your master and to save Osha. But before even that, we have to talk. And I have been waiting 16 years to tell you what I am about to tell you, if you happen to have been alive still, even though I thought you were dead. Anyway, this kind of confirms he had no clue that this was May all along, that it was probably Basil, or again something she said in that final conversation that finally convinced him or woke him up to the reality that this is not Osha. And I say that for a couple reasons. One being he seems concerned about Osha. He wants to go and save Osha. So if he was concerned about her, why would he have left her behind to play this little charade game with May? Also, he says he wants to find her master, but why does he think her master is alive? Didn't he let the bugs or the amber moths take the stranger away because he thought the bugs were going to kill him? Wouldn't that have been the whole point? Because if you didn't think they were going to kill him, why would you let them take him? Because now you've lost the Sith, or the stranger, or Qimir, whatever you want to think of him as. You lost the guy who killed a bunch of Jedi and could potentially go train others to do the same. In fact, he even told you that's what he wants to do. So why did he let him go? And why is he now looking for him? And why does he want to save Osha? Does he know the master took Osha? Does he know Qimir took Osha? And if so, how does he know that? He was under the impression this was Osha, and now he's like put everything together that has happened, but he shouldn't have any way to know that for sure. Again, I would think he would be under the impression that Qimir was killed by the bugs and that Osha is just kind of chilling on Kofar, wondering where the hell everybody went. But anyway, the episode then ends back on probably Octu, where we see, of course, Osha put on the helmet. After a couple moments of hesitation, she does indeed put it on, and then we kind of see through her eyes, we see out through the helmet and hear her breathing, which is actually pretty good. I kind of like that. And my guess is now that next week, the next episode, the 7th of 8 episodes, is finally going to show us what happened 16 years ago. And it is going to do that both from the perspective of Soul, who is telling his story, literally telling his story to May, and from the perspective of Osha, which I kind of thought we already got. But I think we are going to get more of her perspective as she is now put on this helmet. It is just her and the Force and what she brings with her. So she is going to remember things, she's going to have some revelations, and next week's episode again is going to show us exactly what happened, or show us what happened from their point of views. And so, to wrap it up, I'm close to saying that this was actually a good episode. It was certainly a decent episode. There was the one aspect of it that I really enjoyed, but it is once again hampered by poor writing. It is hampered by contrivances. It is hampered by poor character motivation. It is hampered by things just happening because the plot needs them to happen. The other big problem with this show is that I just don't really care about most of the episodes. I don't care that much about the two main characters, May and Osha. In fact, if you remove them or kind of alter them and make the show actually about Soul and Qimir, if you make this a show about the dichotomy between the Sith and the Jedi and their approaches, I think you would actually have something pretty damn good here. There is something worth exploring here, absolutely. I don't know that we need to explore it in a way where we, again, paint the Jedi as probably bad or responsible for the Sith, but there is something worth exploring here. There is a decent idea here, but it is just burdened by poor execution. And I think these short runtimes really just go to show how they didn't know how to expand on the idea. They didn't know how to execute it. They probably wrote this thing and had, a couple pages essentially. They had a couple hours and then realized, well, we need to make this an 8-episode show. Disney wants 8 episodes, so let's try to pad things out. Let's try to drag this thing out a little bit more. Let's try to keep it intriguing by being vague. And it just ends up kind of feeling like, again, they just didn't know how to execute on a pretty good idea. Well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode, or tell me what you think about what I thought of this episode, or give me your theories. What do you think is going on with Vernestra? Do you think she is a Sith? Is she related to the Sith, somehow associated with them? Whatever you think about anything, leave it in the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And so until next time, thanks for watching.